one of the first questions that I really want to pose to both of you, because I think I would be remiss if I didn't really talk about the effects of COVID-19 on our community, both military and veterans. So COVID-19 has obviously really taken over the United States and really internationally. And I really worry about the effect that COVID-19 is having on veterans' health, mental health, and well-being. So what are some of your thoughts about COVID-19 and how it's affecting the military and veteran community? And I'll let Jesse start since Guido was able to introduce himself first. I'll let Jesse start.
So for me, one of the things I still go to the VA now after I've been out for a number of years. One of the things that I noticed that the VA has a hard time doing is to make sure that to get the testing, the COVID-19 test done for a lot of our veterans. So I believe that one of the ways that we can do that, we need to expand our VA system in terms of financial resources so that it can order more tests to get our veterans tested. And in addition to that, we have to make it more serious. A lot of veterans, they tend to be a little hard charging. They tend to think like, oh no, I can make it through anything. And that's the boot camp and the I guess the military experience to teach you to fight through anything. But we have to educate them and tell them that this is a dangerous thing. Having COVID-19 can affect not just you, but your loved ones, your moms, your grandparents. And we have to do better at educating the veterans on the how serious this is. And one of the ways we do that is, connect them with commanders, getting on bases, show them the resources, and also strengthening our veterans administrations so that they can have the testings when people do decide to get tested, they can be tested. But I'll come to Guido, continue with his assessment, what he believes.
Sure, thank you, Jesse, and it's really good to hear your personal experience as a veteran. Let me go into two things first that we sometimes overlook. You did mention one of them. There's a lot of we have a lot of homeless veterans. I think the last number in this country was 37,000 last year, at the end of last year. A lot of those homeless veterans rely on services such as shelters and other, food services, medical services. And a lot of those shelters, particularly, we're seeing around the country, are incredibly susceptible to the pandemic in ways that maybe not official. Greg, just a moment. So some of those shelters are susceptible, particularly to COVID-19, and you've got thousands of homeless veterans relying on those shelters where people are, in many circumstances, put together in tight groups, and they're sharing spaces and resources. And we need to really watch after those veterans and make sure the VA addresses the shelter programs correctly to adjust for COVID-19. Another one is PTSD. We have a lot of veterans. PTSD is 100% disability rating. Those veterans with PTSD who have severe psychological issues from the trauma of warfare might not, and frequently do not, adjust to new circumstances easily or lightly. So we've got tens of thousands of veterans out there with PTSD who are now all of a sudden in their house 24/7. They can't go to work. They can't go see their doctor. They're using telehealth, and it's a really tough challenge. So we as a community and us as representatives, hopeful representatives, we need to push the VA to again, adjust on acclimating for people with PTSD, veterans with PTSD. There are two other things that I really want to mention today that, to me, honestly, I think is kind of a shot to some of our veterans. One, the federal government mobilized 40,000 National Guardsmen who are all over the country doing checkpoints. They're conducting tests. We have them in Palm Beach County and around, and I'm sure you have them on the West Coast as well. They are, in many cases, the front lines of the COVID-19 battle, alongside the other first responders. Those 40,000 National Guard members were mobilized for 89 days by the federal government, just 1 day shy of what you need to get certain education and retirement benefits. You need 90 days for some of those other benefits if you're a guardsman or reservist going on those active duty orders. And I thought that was a little bit of a shot towards some of our service members to put them out there for 89, not 90 days, saving the government money, but not living up to that commitment to our veterans. Now, there is a push right now to extend that deployment beyond June 24th. There is a bill out there in Congress that would do that. As a member of Congress, I would certainly push for that. The current representative here has not yet got onto that bill, but it's incredibly important that we honor our commitment to those service members. Right now, of those 40,000, we have over 1,100 National Guard members who've tested positive for coronavirus. They're on the front lines. Again, so that's incredibly important. The other thing I want to mention is that we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about veterans. At the VA, they've administered some new treatments for COVID-19 that aren't yet proven to be safe. And there are thousands that have been given certain types of treatments that are not yet proven to be safe. And I'm concerned, we don't yet know the impacts of what that's doing, but the federal government has decided to take on a risk and use some new treatments for COVID-19 for veterans at the VA. And I'm very concerned that some of those treatments might lead to the opposite effects that we want. So I want to make sure that every medical treatment we're giving a veteran is tested and proven for the veterans and for human beings. We need to make sure that we're not taking risks on our veterans or using veterans as guinea pigs for any type of treatment.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I remember like being active duty Air Force myself and just knowing as soon as a drug hit the market, we were going to be some of the first people tested to see how well it works, which is contradictory to really what the military stands for. So I really appreciate that. I know that you talk about PTSD and how much, you know, getting treatment for our service members is essential for PTSD. And I know that people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder because of physical issues that they've had, issues in wartime, but also I know a lot of people that suffer from PTSD because of sexual assault in the military. It's been rampant. It's been rampant for a very long time. And I really want to ask your opinion, starting with Guido, as far as, you know, what do you think about sexual assault in the military? Is the military doing enough to protect its victims and really to bring the perpetrators to justice?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Sexual assault in the military is, unfortunately, it was rampant when our country started, and it's rampant today. There have been multiple studies on the proliferation of sexual assault in the military, and it's not always the traditional, I don't want to say traditional, but it's not always male on female. If you look at the study that was put out last year, the highest case of sexual assault in the military is frequently on Navy ships. And a lot of times that's men on men harassing, all types of hazing, which is sexual in nature. It's still rampant across the services. When I was a congressional staffer, I've had hundreds of people from our congressional district and from districts all around the country when I was working for the state of Hawaii that would come into the office and tell you their story saying they want help, they want justice. So it's something that's still very prevalent, and it goes from everything from remarks to the very severe incidents of rape across the military. Now, there are multiple formulas that have been considered in adjusting how the military responds to sexual assault, but to your question, I don't think we're quite there yet. We have certain circumstances on bases where, because a commander of a unit doesn't want that to reflect on their leadership and their chain of command, there are instances that have happened in the past, and both of you being service members and veterans might know about these instances where things are hidden, things are quieted down, the person might be moved from one unit to another, but there's not really a punishment in the long term. And that sexual assault, that severe trauma from sexual assault transitions into their veteran life, it transitions into their civilian life, it transitions into the relationships with their future spouse. So we're not doing enough yet. We need to do more. Frequently, we're way too slow and bulky in terms of how we respond and organize it, and we have responses to corporate and not, I'd say, don't have the human element to those responses.
Thank you for sharing that, Guido. I appreciate it. Jesse, your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts on sexual assault is it's something, like I said, I served a couple of years ago. So I got to see, you know, some of the kind of the bad side of serving sometimes is that we tend to, one, not speak up because of, we're scared of being reprimanded, or two, we do speak up and there's no accountability to the leaders to protect us. Now, how do we solve this problem? I mean, this is not just a military problem. This is also found in the public sector. We have an environment that's set up where you are demonized for just wanting to work in an environment that is not dangerous to you. And I think one of the ways we do that is more accountability. We have to get more independent sources into our commands. When I mean by independent sources, I mean having, counselors available on site in every command where someone can go to and talk to about some of the issues that are affecting them. And to solve the first problem, where lack of leadership, we need to have leaders who understand the importance of sexual assault. And not just so that, they say it, but they also back it up with action. And so I believe that every military branch, they do kind of have guidelines on how to solve this issue within the ranks, but we have to be more, us, as congressmen, have to make sure that we tell our generals, if we're going to give you this position of power, because, we are the one who grants, generals the ability to go up in rank. We want to make sure that you address the sexual assault issue that's happening in the military. We should not be promoting generals who have a bad track record in terms of solving those problems. We shouldn't promote generals who are not going to address those problems. So I think that's the best thing we need to do is twofold. We need to fix the leadership. There's more people in leadership to understand that that's an issue. And if we're going to give you a command, that you address that issue. And second, we need to have more independent psychologists and people who have the ability to talk to our service member while they're in, so that they can be able to feel free to share that problem. That to me, that's a twofold issue, and that's what I think will solve that problem. And I think that's what we need to do, just more conversation to get it fixed and resolved.
And I just want to add one thing to that. According to the VA itself, 1 in every 4 women in the military, 25% of our women in the military experience some form of sexual assault. 1 in every 100 men in the military experience some form of sexual assault. Now, there are far more men in the military. It's over 80% men in the military currently, it's a lower ratio than it was in the past. But I mean, that's a very high number. And frequently, our military and veteran community has a higher exposure to sexual assault, traumatic, life-changing sexual assault than even some of their civilian society counterparts. And I totally agree with Jesse with everything he was mentioning, and he's got a lot of that first world experience being in the military in a forward deployed combat zone. And I've seen it even in my reserve capacity. And again, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of cases of people bringing up traumatic sexual assault issues. You're a congressional staffer and somebody's really looking for help. And I know that Jesse and myself, as members of Congress, would be strong advocates for those community members, for justice, and for corrections within the program going forward.
Thank you so much, Guido, for sharing. And thank you both for really talking about a very tough issue that is sometimes either just not discussed or ignored altogether. So one of the questions that we actually got from Facebook, to veer off a little bit, is from Alex Beatty, who says, we had $3 trillion for a stimulus, but have had to cut our guardsmen out of benefits. And that is immoral. So what are your thoughts, starting with Jesse, on what Alex's statement was?
I agree with Alex. It isn't a moral issue when you have people who, who decide to make a choice to sacrifice their lives for our country. We need to make sure that we take care of them at any cost. The $1 trillion stimulus plan, when it was presented, the intent was there, but the execution wasn't. And we saw a lot of, people left out this last stimulus plan. We also saw, especially our military, we didn't address the COVID-19 testing for service members. We didn't address the VA funding needed to make sure we provide support to those service members. we didn't address a lot of things. And I think that, if you're gonna come out with a stimulus plan, focusing on getting America back, well, we need to focus on the people who give to America every single day. And those are our service members. And I think that if we were to do it again, another stimulus plan, that issue should be addressed first. It should be the first issue that we address, is making sure that our guardsmen have not only stimulus to help them, but also having the COVID testing, and also having the abilities to reach out and get more support. Because most, E5 or greater, E5 is most ranks, it depends on what your service. But if you're E5 greater, you're usually off base. And usually when you're off base, you get an allowance, leave like BAH. Sorry, I can tell I haven't been there in a while. But those, most people who live off base have more bills than the average service member. And those bills, they need more support. So they were kind of left out because those service members didn't really get that addressed to them. Because not only did they still receive their BAH, but, they can still essentially have issues in terms of paying their bills if they contract the COVID-19, because they still have to stay at home for 14 days. So these are things that I think that we can do in the next stimulus, is to make sure that we have more targeted stimulus plan to help our service members. With that,
yeah. Thank you, Jesse. And going off of what you said, 40,000 National Guard members were activated and are on the front lines of the COVID-19 coronavirus fight. Around the country, National Guard members have been an integral part of our response, of our nationwide response. In each state, because the National Guard kind of plays a state and federal role, they've been a pivotal part of each state's responses on an individual state level. Now, as we mentioned, the federal government deployed those National Guard members, as of now, for 89 days, not giving them those 90 days needed to get the extra educational and other and retirement benefits. That's a stab in the back. You're going to deploy somebody for 1 day short so they don't get those benefits. And 1,100 plus of those Guard members who deployed to be on the front lines of the coronavirus fight have been tested positive. It's not just Guard even. There are Navy reservists and other types of reservists in their other capacities deploying, that many of whom won't get a special type of benefit that they were promised when they enlisted or commissioned. Now, I think not only do we need to provide those benefits and give them that extra day so they're serving, they're risking their lives, they don't need to get cheaped out by the government, but we need to provide other types of awards for their service here. The federal government needs to come up with a national reward for this specific response, and every type of armed contingency we do something like this, we need to do it as well for this unarmed contingency. Now, there is already a bill, HR 6980, and it's I don't want to get into the technical name, but basically it extends the Guard service so those members of the Guard receive the benefits they need. Now, I can speak for myself. If I was a member of Congress, I'd be pushing for this bill. I'm sure that I'm just assuming Jesse would as well. I believe he would, but there are plenty of members of Congress that we need to get on this bill, because it's unacceptable that our Guardsmen haven't been given those benefits while they're deploying in that coronavirus fight.
Thank you so much. I know that, you mentioned COVID and how it's affecting, our fellow service members and how we need to protect them. And I think of some members that are constantly putting themselves in harm's way, are just like some people that are kind of in public service and in the USPS system right now. So I know that we've got, about 100,000 veterans that are working for the USPS that are constantly in contact with people every day, but they are in danger of contracting this virus. So kind of what are your thoughts, starting with Jesse, on the USPS and then the threats that are to the post office?
Sorry, apologize. So for the Postal Service, what our thought, from what I'm seeing, the USPS employs about 100,000 vets. So they do a lot of our hiring. I believe that, we have to continue to fund USPS, as a federal government, it's important. But it's important because it gives our vets jobs. But we have to understand that we have to find a way to make sure our vets are employable, not just only in the USPS, but in you're all employable once they leave the military. One of the hardest things for me when I was in the military was transitioning out. It was tough because waking up from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., being told what to do, it's a hard transition, for most service members. That, hey, guess what? No one's telling you to get up. Now you have to get up and fight and go earn your money. Before you just went and you got to check every first and the 15th. Now, you have to get up and you have to find a way to make sure you survive. And that's a hard transition for most people, that, mentally and also economically. For me, one of the ways that was helped through that transition was I had a lot of prior military, departments, as you would say, like the veteran foreign war organizations who actually helped guide a lot of it. And a lot of our VA programs in school help teach classes to vets to help them transition from the military back to the civilian world. They taught us how to pay our bills. They taught us how to find a job, how to complete a resume. All these different programs help me transition from the military back to the civilian side. Even in the military, there's certain programs such as that helps a lot of vets transition out. Now, I think that when it comes to the USPS issue, that is an industry that is being, ravaged with change. And we have to do better at making sure, how do we make the USPS around? How do we keep it around for another 30 years? Because as you can see, MELS is decreasing and a lot of veterans are going to lose their jobs in the future. So we have to, it's kind of a two-pronged issue where we have to find a way to keep it, available for them. But we also have to find another way to train our vets outside of the military into other fast-growing industries. For example, computer programming. For example, service industries. So there's so many different industries that we can get our vets involved into once they leave the military, versus just keeping them, trying to train them to go into the USPS system, because that system is eventually, over time, will eventually not be around. And so we have to find a better way of transitioning them into other fast emerging growing industries. But with that being said, Guado, I'll let you go ahead and for your perspective.
Sure. Thank you, Jesse. Now, as you both mentioned, the USPS employs around 100,000 veterans. And for many veterans, the USPS is a second career. Maybe retirees, they do 20 years and they do 20 years in the USPS. And it's a way to make national service pay a living wage. You get a good salary in the military, you get out, you have healthcare and salary again in the USPS, and you're able to continue to serve your country in a way that's, it's one of the few places you can really become engaged in your community and have a vested interest in it. Now, one of the big differences between the USPS and some of the other services, and I want to make this more about veterans than deliveries and postal, is that USPS delivers rule. Some of the other services like FedEx and the other ones won't go places that aren't profitable. So yeah, the USPS's business model isn't as strong, but it's a place that serves American communities, and veterans that are engaged in it have a high degree of satisfaction for continued American service, national service. They may be going to very rural places in Alaska, Florida, Montana, you name it, where the USPS really stands out differently from the private industries. Now, one thing that I'll also say on this is that the efforts right now to gut, and in some cases, members of Congress dismantling the USPS, a lot of that goes back to money and politics. FedEx and the other services, and this is not, I'm not saying private services shouldn't be there, but FedEx, Amazon, and some of the others do pay significant money to try to change the course of American policy, and every year gut the USPS a little bit. I know that a lot of members of Congress, including Congresswoman Frankel in this district, take a lot of money from those kind of private carrier services. And I am concerned that over time, and I hope this doesn't happen, but I am concerned that we don't end up in a model where rural Americans especially don't have delivery because the USPS isn't there anymore, and there's not a veteran delivering that letter or that package, and the private industry won't go out there because it's too far away. So I am concerned about the USPS and its gutting and veterans, but I think Jesse brought up a really good point. Transition programs. Right now there's federal programs that give you benefits, basically hiring benefits. You get a certain point system. If you were a veteran, you get a few X amount of points. If you were a veteran that was in a combat situation, you get another amount of points. So it makes you more eligible for federal programming. But we need to I think those are wonderful programs, and that's why you have a lot of our federal employees that are veterans. They do one service career, they get out, and they do another service career, and they live a fruitful retirement afterwards. But there's more to it than that. There are a lot of programs that maybe push veterans towards 4 years academic degrees, and there's a growing discussion of, can we push veterans towards maybe something more technical associated with their military service? If they were a truck driver, can we push them towards a technical certification after the military dealing with trucks? Or if those veterans want to get into certain types of sustainable agriculture, there's now this discussion of how can we put veterans into situations where you can go a little bit outside of that traditional path and still have a successful transition out of the military. Jesse, he experienced that active duty to civilian life civilian life transition. That is the moment when suicide rate is one of the highest across the country. Veterans, civilians, active duty, you name it. It's such a sad thing to see people. Maybe they get their position is no longer open in the military for their specific pay grade, and they have to get out. And then they're put in these situations where they were in Afghanistan a month ago, and all of a sudden they're in Seattle and they're trying to figure out what to do, and they could end up homeless, or they might not have the family support structure. Not everybody has a family support structure, and it's one of the highest suicide rates there is across all aspects of society is veteran service members transitioning out. So again, the actual question was on USPS. I think that we've addressed that, but I just to kind of plug on what Jesse was mentioning, the transition programs are critically important, and keeping an eye on them is very important as well.
I would second that, to say that, yes, the USPS is very important for the rural community. I agree with you, and I think that is something we have to continue to fund. But like I said, as more and more vets transition out in the next 30, 40 years, we do have to start having a conversation on how do we get them in the best jobs that are going to be around for another 100 years. Because it's all about giving back to your country giving back to you. And so that's why I believe, and I think that if we continue to have that conversation, how we can make the USPS more robust, and bring people in, that's awesome. But if we can't, how do we find them jobs? So that's important.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I think the only other question that I had is, we kind of mentioned it before when we were talking about the VA system. And I know that I myself have had to wait up to a year to try to get things taken care of, get benefits, get, healthcare and all of that. So kind of what are your thoughts on the current way the VA is running, and how long it takes for things to get done? And that's for Guido.
Sure. Thank you. That's one of the most important aspects of transition into veteran life. And from when you hear from veterans, you mentioned it from your personal experience, and Jesse's got his personal experience as well. One of the most frustrating things of becoming a veteran. Right here in Palm Beach County, our VA hospital has a 1 week wait time to get an appointment after you request that appointment. That's a long time. And not all these veterans they might be using a digital system where they're going to the county library requesting an appointment, because not all veterans are millennials with laptops. Many of them are from a totally different generation, and all the socioeconomic levels totally change as well. So each one has a totally different experience in that sense. Another aspect of the VA is we have a huge increase in the types of veterans at the VA. If you talk to some of the veterans who are Vietnam, World War II, Korea, they were at the VA and things were relatively low. People had similar circumstances across the board, and all of a sudden you've got hundreds of thousands of people from the post 9/11 wars coming in, people like yourself and people like Jesse with totally, and you just got back from Qatar, Jesse was in Iraq, with totally different needs in a different military that are now transitioning to the VA. And one example of that, new types of treatments that we haven't even acclimated to yet, like burn pits. And I think we may have mentioned this before. In Vietnam, people were exposed to Agent Orange. Our generation has been exposed to toxic burn pits. In Iraq and Afghanistan and in Somalia even, they have tires. Their camps didn't have receptacles, proper receptacles, tires, batteries, feces, medical devices, all their plastic wrappers, you name it, depending on the camp, a different circumstance. And they're putting that in a fire and they're sleeping next to the fire. So you've got a VA that has all these new types of cancers coming in from these exposures to burn pits, but the VA is not yet able to give the compensation and treatment for those types of circumstances. Another big issue in our VA centers is women. Women are the fastest growing group of veterans. It wasn't until, I believe it was 1948 when women were made permanent members of the US military. But now you have all these combat veterans coming in, and many of them are women. The VA hasn't perfected, and probably never will perfect, how to do prosthetics for women, how to do OBGYN, how to handle pregnant women, how to have women service providers there that can address the needs of women. This is another thing that we need to really improve on, really focus on. There's a bill in Congress that aims to retrofit the VA so that all the VAs across the country are able to handle the circumstances of a woman just as well as they are for men, because the VA really a lot of the VAs were kind of set up for that Korea, Vietnam generation, which is by and large men, mostly men. Not only men, but mostly. The last thing I'll say on that is there were 50,000 unfilled VA jobs at the end of last year. There are plenty of positions across the country. I remember when I was working for the state of Hawaii as a military legislative assistant for Congresswoman Gabbard, we had multiple VA offices in Hawaii and on the Big Island and on Maui that didn't even have positions filled. And the federal, anybody who's gone through this, and you may have yourself, anybody who's gone through the federal hiring process, it can take a long time. And it could take 2 years for them to pick who they're going to pick. And then all of a sudden, that person doesn't want to do it anymore because it's been a year or two. And you have that all across the country. So the VA also needs to adapt and fill those positions because there are veterans that aren't getting the treatment that they deserve and are owed because of bureaucratic challenges that we're facing.
Thank you for sharing, Guido. And Jesse, for your response to, how can we really deal with these VA wait times and possible treatment?
So that is kind of my main platform. I believe in the public option for working families, and I want to have that available to do the use of the VA. Guido said it. It's 50,000 jobs that currently are available for people to apply for today, and that shows me that there's people not filling those jobs. And I was just saying earlier that how we had veterans, who can't find a job. Those jobs should be filled by veterans. We should find better transitioning programs to get those vets the skill sets that they need so they can work in the VA, so they can continue to serve their fellow brothers and sisters in armed services. Now, that should help with wait times. I mean, to me, wait times, no matter where you go, it's because you don't have enough people to support the amount of people in that infrastructure. And in this case, we have the positions available. Now we just have to make sure we train people into those positions. I believe that's the best way we deal with wait times. We also need to continue to fund the VA. We ask people to go out there and give their lives and sacrifice their lives, but we get very tight when it comes to supporting them. So one of the things that we need to do is provide more funding to the VA, bring more money in, and also, fill those jobs, fill them with military people who can. I mean, I myself, when I was in the military, I was 3051, which is a supply guy. But if we needed to mop the floor, guess what? That's your job now. So you have to mop the floor. So military people adapt. I mean, you guys, Guido and Kiara, y'all both know it. We adapt to any situation. So we can teach vets, even though they may not have been the MOS, we can teach them how to become nurses. We can teach them how to become support staff for the VA facilities so that we can have the amount of support that we need so that we can bring these wait times down. So that's how I believe we can do that. I believe we can address that issue. And I think that's what we are going to do when we get to Congress. I promise.
And just mentioned one thing that reminded me of another issue with VA and wait times. There is a push to privatize a lot of aspects of the VA. While some argue that that brings speed and efficiency, at another level, we've seen certain VA programs not accountable when they become privatized. So you've had, it was last year, the administrator of VA student loans, one of the larger, I believe it was the post 9/11 student loan program. All of a sudden, students, because of a software glitch, weren't getting the benefits that they needed, and the schools were coming after them saying, "Where's our payment from the VA? We're not getting it. Where's your payment for your apartment?" And there were hundreds of thousands of people affected at the time. The VA eventually was able to correct itself, but a lot of that was due to a privatization, a company that was taken in to run a software program that, one, it delivered late, and two, it delivered. It didn't work out as it was supposed to be, and there wasn't proper accountability. And then it was a whole nother, I believe, a year or so until they were able to recorrect with another company that they took in on a contract. So while that's something we need to watch for, we need to make sure that the public and accountable facilities we need within the VA stay public and accountable. And we need to, really watch and in many cases push back on the case to take away VA jobs, which again are good jobs, very frequently filled by veterans, providing federal benefits, to privatizations that's a little bit less accountable frequently and doesn't provide the same veterans benefits to our population.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Guido. I appreciate it. A question from the audience. Alex Beatty asks, what kind of hope should those that are not able to enter the military and too poor for college have as far as upward mobility in poor or minority living situations have to advance? And I will actually give that question first to Jesse.
Okay, so that's one of the issues that are on my platform. I believe in we should have more trade schools available to high school students. For people who have who can't enter the military and who cannot, afford college. I believe that a lot of our trade schools, they've almost dwindled down in America because we have emerging technologies and a lot of schools are not keeping up. One of the ways we can do that is by putting programs such as computer programming, such as industrial, it's called, I'm trying to think of the correct name, but supply chain management, there you go. Supply chain management positions, and also teachers, a lot of teacher certifications can be done, like substitute teachers in the high school level. So those are all different career fields that people can go into when they leave high school. The military is not the only option. I personally believe that everyone should serve. I mean, I learned a lot through service. I learned a lot through how to give back to my community, what it feels like to doing for others, when you have the means to do it. So I always encourage people to serve their country, but it's not the only option. We have, this is America. We have opportunity in other fields that you can contribute. And what we need to do is properly train the people in high school on how to do those fields. I mean, our college student loan debt is increasing at a rapid pace. A lot of people are going to school and they graduate college. They're in $100,000 worth of debt, and they can't find a job to pay them at least $30,000 a year. That's an issue. And what we need to do is make sure that we educate more people in the high school level to make sure that they get jobs when they leave high school. So that's my answer. I'll hand it to Guido and he tells me what he thinks.
Thank you, Jesse. Definitely agree with you in terms of boosting trade schools and other high school programs that can better prepare students, young Americans, for a really tough job market out there, especially right now. Just coming back from Alex Beatty's point, the military in some cases can be a force equalizer in the sense that you join the military, you get a good paying job, you get health care, and you could be from an underprivileged community. The first one sent to the military will send you to university. And all of a sudden you're somebody with, new training, university education, and military experience, and you're entering the job market. But not everybody can do that. The percentage of people in the country that are qualified to join the military is less than 10%. I believe it's 1 to 3% of people in the country who are physically qualified, and from a variety of standpoints. So in going back to Jesse's point, public education, investing in public programmings, I think is more important now than ever. You have other countries around the world where you want a higher education and you don't come out with any debt. In some cases, you are paid a little stipend while if you get into the public university all across the world. And here you have students coming out with averages of between $27,000 and $37,000 throughout their education. And right now, as we see right now, the graduating class of 2020 coming out with all that debt. There is a little bit of relief, but it's only for another month or a couple months. They're in a tough situation. Healthcare, you have people in this country that have to, after age 26, you can't be on your parents' healthcare anymore. You all of a sudden are in a really tough world where healthcare can be somewhere between $100 and $800, depending on who you are, the healthcare program, and your conditions. Investing in our healthcare, investing in our public education are two ways to really help certain people from underprivileged socioeconomic backgrounds get into that good job market with real livable wages, and access, to really follow what they're trying to do in life. But right now, and I'll just say this to Alex, is you have the opportunity in August and in November to vote in candidates that support those public health care programs and support those public education programs. So I think one of the things that you can do is express your democratic, be a community activist, but really express that democratic value we hold dear, and vote in those candidates that support those programs that help those communities.
That's awesome. That's really, I really like that question, Alex. So thank you so much for posing it. And just to kind of add on to what both of you have said, you can definitely look into the different trade crafts, because a lot of jobs nowadays, especially, it's not so much about the 2, 4, and 6 year degree, but it's really about certifications. And some certifications only take a couple of months to really put the time and effort into getting a certification to get you into that first door and first opportunity. And then with that, just look at other public servant jobs, because even if you can't and don't qualify for whatever reason to join the military, then you can definitely look into, maybe nursing or firefighter. You can look into becoming a teacher, artist, writer, musician, and a lot of these trades, you can really be self-taught. Go onto YouTube, get a book, go to the library, look at the free resources that are in your community, because a lot of these things you can really try to find information yourself, and you can really build something. And then the last thing is, make a business. If you can see a need in the community, then you can fill that need. If you just have a couple of pieces of information, maybe 1 or 2 people to support you, and really are good with your hands and good with your mind, and trying to come up with new innovative ways to really create a business that you love, that you can appreciate, and really at the end of the day profit from, because these bills have to get paid every 1st and the 15th. So I think the last question for tonight is going to be from Aviva, who posed a question on Facebook, which is, what does Memorial Day mean to you? And we will start with Guido.
Thank you very much, Kiara and Aviva. One thing that I had this conversation earlier, there's a little bit of a confusion sometimes in Memorial Day, Veterans Day, Armed Services Day. And just to kind of comment on that real quickly. Memorial Day, we honor those who have fallen, service members who have fallen in the line of duty. were no longer with us. Veterans Day and Armed Services Day, we're honoring those in the armed services currently, and Veterans Day, we're honoring all those veterans. Memorial Day, from a more personal note. I have quite a few veterans in my family, my uncle, two grandfathers, and some even before that. We have currently the situation with COVID, and just looking into it, you have cemeteries across the country where people can't even go in and commemorate people that, you know, they might have served with for 15 years and they died, you know, right next to them. Right now, today, this Memorial Day, it really means to me that we need to push for, as a unit together, getting out of this kind of a crisis, because we can't even honor our fallen service members in the way we, you know, the way they're supposed to be honored. And that to me is a sad thing, but we're doing it right now. I think we're doing a good job by discussing it, and we've done a good job commemorating it in other ways, and it's something that we're adjusting to. As a Navy sailor for 5 years, while I'm not a veteran currently, seeing people like Jesse and Kiara, and my experience on the Hill, when you have people that come in and are looking for assistance for their loved ones, theirs who have fallen, people who have fallen, Gold Star families that aren't receiving the benefits, who have somebody within their family who died in the line of duty, it means to me that we need to do more for them. And that we're not quite there. Progress is being made, but we're not quite there. And to me, it's just such an honor to be here with you two veterans, to honor this day, and remember all of those who have fallen.
Thank you so much. Jesse?
What Memorial Day means to me, it's a time of reflection. You know, there's so many people, like I said earlier, when I went to Iraq, you know, there's some people who didn't come back. And so for me, every Memorial Day allows me to reflect on people who give their lives to our country, from the World War II vets, from the World War I vets, to the Iraqi vets, to the Vietnam vets. All those peoples died for one common belief, and that's America. They died for the idea that everyone in this country has the ability to strive if they work hard. They died for the idea of their children to grow up in a country where they can say whatever they feel. Memorial Day is about people sacrificing their lives for their country, about people who gave all they can give from you and me. So when I think back on Memorial Day, every Memorial Day, I think about those people. I think of the moms and the daughters, and like I said, the fathers who can't eat with their loved ones because they sacrificed for their country. All these things are what Memorial Day is for me. You know, it's a day of reflection. It's a day for me to mourn, for a day for us to celebrate the greatness of America. And it's a day that it's in its complexities, a day where we can understand that people who died for us want us all to be involved in our democracy. They want us to be involved in making a change for a greater America. They want us to be involved so we push America forward. So that's what Memorial Day to me is, the sacrifice of many, many people who died for the common good of America. So that's what I used to reflect on.
Thank you so much for both of you sharing what Memorial Day means to you. So as we start to wrap up the discussion, this has been really great for both military and non-military. I really just want to ask both of you if you had any closing remarks that you wanted to share with our audience. And Guido, I will start with you.
Thank you, Kiara. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you for all of those who came to listen today on Facebook and on Zoom. Going back to what this is about. This is today's Memorial Day. We're having a discussion on military members and veterans, and we're talking about how we can improve their lives. And we got into how we can improve society as a whole. But I want to, again, just ping it back to Memorial Day. I mean, one last thought. Those who have fallen come from, as Jesse mentioned, you know, you've got Korea, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Lebanon, Panama, you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia. The list goes on and what they fought and died for. But my thought on that is, those people who died, there was no discrimination, whether they were Republican, Democrat, gay, lesbian, transgender. The Memorial Day is something that is undiscriminatory versus somebody's background, socioeconomic background. And if everybody in the military side by side, and I've seen this, it's one of the most beautiful things to see men and women, brothers and sisters, and to use the expression, brothers and sisters in arms, and you don't see that that same disparity that you see sometimes in society or frequently in society. That's one of the things I appreciate about the military the most, and that's one of the things I just want to leave as a final touch on Memorial Day. That those who did die, there was no discrimination. It doesn't matter where they came from; they died for the same reason.
Thank you so much for sharing. Jesse, did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, this is a great platform. I think I learned a lot. I hope many people learned a lot, not only about the issues that affect veterans, but also where we have to go. You know, what we're gonna have to do to move our essentially our mission forward. And what we need to continue to do is to continue to have these conversations on how we push our I say community because that's what it is. It's a brotherhood and sisterhood of people who decide to make a sacrifice in their country, and so that we can live in a better life. So I call us a community of people, and we need to have the conversation among our community. Is how do we continue to push that message forward? This was a great event that we did that. Like I said, I learned a lot, and I'm going to take that and make sure I put it in my platform because all these things matter. And we need to continue to have these conversations as a community. And I want to thank you guys for this platform. Don't forget to vote August 18th. I do have to say that. I mean, we're both new to the political world. We both have a passion for helping people. And that's why we got in this race. But we need people to vote. We're faced with politics of money, and we're losing the foundation of how America was created. It was created on the idealisms of people who thought that they should be free. And we should continue to have that message. And, you know, I know money is involved in our politics, but there's still people out here who's trying to fight for the idealism and try to fight for people. So I say that to make sure that everyone that's listening to this, to go out on August 18th, support candidates who are giving and sacrificing all they can and all their resources to make sure that we push America forward. And I thank you.
Thank you so much. So last question, really last comment to both of you. Do you want to share how everyone that is watching and is going to watch in the future can find you on social media and your websites? And I will start with Jesse.
Yeah, so you can go to jessephilippe.com, JESSEPHILIPPE.com. You can also find me on Facebook under the same, Jesse P for Congress. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram. So those are all different ways you can find and connect with us. My campaign number, I think, is also on the website. So if you want to communicate, call us, text us, we're there. That's the best way to reach us.
Great. Thank you. And again, thank you to everybody for being here today. Again, on Facebook Live, I can already see those people tuning in, and right here on Zoom. If you want to reach out to the campaign, we're very responsive. Any question you have, any concern you have, if you go to VoteGuido, VOTEGUIDO.com, that has all the links to all of our social media platforms, as well as the email you can send us a question to if you're interested in volunteering or supporting, or just want to get engaged in other ways. It's info@voteguido.com. As Jesse mentioned, we're two candidates. We're here we're brand new, but we're here for a bit different of a reason. We're not the kind of, we're coming in not from that place of I've been in politics for 30, 40 years and millions of dollars in a campaign account. We are both here because of ideals, because we want to use our voices and enter this race and sacrifice as much as we can to provide a new option for voters on August 18th. So it couldn't be more of a privilege to be a Navy service member and also be a community activist right here running for Congress. And thank you to everybody who tuned in again.
Thank you both for the conversation today. I really appreciate it. Thank you for everyone that is watching today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day. Bye.